Mystery Yarn Part 2. In the Friday night edition of the Centerburg Bugle, Homer read a long article on the county fair and a special announcement about the contest to determine the world's champion string saver, and then the rules that Judge Shank had drawn up. Each contestant may appoint an assistant to help with the maneuvering of his ball of string. The balls of string shall be unwound, therefore, rolled around the county fair racetrack in a counterclockwise direction, starting from the judge's booth in front of the main grandstand. The ball of string reaching around the racetrack the greatest number of times shall be regarded as the winning string, and that string's owner shall be declared winner of the prize and the title of World's Champion String Saver. The string shall be unwound for 2 hours every afternoon of the week of the fair, starting at 2 o'clock. Homer read the rules and noticed that nothing was mentioned about the gentleman's agreement between the sheriff and Uncle Telly. But that sort of news travels fast in the town the size of Centerburg, and it wasn't long before practically everybody knew that the winner was supposed to have the hand of Miss Terwilliger in marriage. Homer decided to go past Uncle Telly's house and see what he thought about the rules. Homer couldn't help wondering what a woman who could cook fried chicken so well and who was as clever as Miss Terwilliger would do if she heard about the agreement. Homer found Uncle Telly trying to figure out how many miles of string were wound on his ball. He was multiplying 3.1416 by the diameter, and after multiplying by several figures, he asked Homer how many feet in a mile. 5,280, said Homer. Then Uncle Telly multiplied by 4. Then he turned to Homer and said, "I figure there's enough string to go around that racetrack 100 times. Yep, 25 miles of string. Just let the sheriff beat that if he can." "Look, Uncle Telly, here comes the judge and the sheriff again. And look who's with them, Miss Terwilliger." Uncle Telly opened the door before the judge had a chance to knock, and the judge puffed in, followed by the sheriff and Miss Terwilliger. Good day, Telemachus. We have a new contestant for the title of World's Champion String Saver, puffed the judge. Miss Terwilliger blushed and giggled, and while Uncle Telly backed around to the other side of the room and raised his eyebrows at the sheriff in a way that asked, "Did you tell her about the agreement?" The sheriff shrugged his shoulders and wiggled his mustache to show he was just as puzzled as Uncle Telly. Miss Terwilliger, if she did know about the agreement, wasn't admitting it. "Isn't it wonderful," she said to Uncle Telemachus and the sheriff, "that we have so much in common?" "Yes," she tittered, "I've been a savin' string for the past 15 years. All of the colored yarn and odds and ends from knitting classes. I have a beautiful ball of yarn, all colors of the rainbow." "Splendid," said the judge, rubbing his hands together. "Simply splendid, Miss Terwilliger." "But, Judge," interrupted Uncle Telly anxiously. "Do you think," said the sheriff, nudging the judge and winking frantically, "that a woman should enter into a thing of this sort? "Splendid," continued the judge, ignoring these interruptions. "The American female is beginning to find her rightful place in the business and public life of this nation. The sheriff and Telemachus and I deeply appreciate your public spirit, Miss Terwilliger, and I'm sure that the county fair will be an unprecedented success." "Come, Judge," said Miss Terwilliger, with a smile. "I must get back to my knitting shop. Goodbye, Sheriff. Goodbye, Telemachus. I'll see you on Sunday." After the judge and Miss Terwilliger were gone, the sheriff and Uncle Telly each accused the other of telling about the agreement. They finally calmed down and decided that the judge had double-crossed them with his fancy speech about woman's rights. "But, Uncle Telly," said Homer, "there couldn't be 3 balls of string in the world as large as yours and the sheriff's?" "You're wrong, son," said the sheriff with a sigh. "Her ball of string's bigger than mine. She's a clever woman, son, a very clever woman." "If she wins," said Uncle Telley gloomily, "we'll be right back where we started from, waiting for her forever for her to make up her mind." During the next week, the whole county got excited about the contest to determine the world's champion string saver. Everybody started saving string for their favorite contestant. The ladies in Miss Terwilliger's knitting classes reported that Miss Terwilliger was knitting a brand new dress for the occasion. When Homer's mother heard this, she called Aunt Aggie and said, "We should do something about Uncle Telley. You know how men are about their clothes. They can hardly tell one dress or suit from another." The next day they dragged Uncle Telley downtown and picked out a nice, new, very becoming plaid suit for him. The sheriff said, "If they're going to make a fashion show out of this thing, I can dress up too." He sent away special delivery to Chicago and ordered an expertly fashioned, double-breasted Hollywood model suit. On the next day before the fair started, Homer went up to Miss Terwilliger's with the sheriff to see them take her ball of string out of the house. Mr. Olson, the carpenter, had to take out the side of the house because the ball just wouldn't go through the door. When the men rolled it out and onto the truck, the sheriff said, "That's as purty a ball of string as I've ever seen. It's got a woman's touch." Just then Uncle Telley walked up and agreed. "It's awful pretty, being all colors of the rainbow, but it ain't wound tight. It's so soft you can poke your fist right into it." "Yes, but yarn stretches purty much," said the sheriff unhappily.